In our previous video, we found the individual supply curve. So we see here in blue, these were the quantities and prices that we'd be willing and able to sell at. So when we talk about the supply curve, the individual supply curve for a company is the marginal cost curve above the average variable cost. And that's because this point here, that price is the shutdown price, and below that price, we're not willing and able to sell any quantity. So above the shutdown price, we're producing until price is equal to marginal cost, because if the marginal benefit's more than the marginal cost, we would do more. And if the marginal cost is more than the marginal benefit, we would do less. So we end up where price is equal to marginal cost. So the supply curve is the marginal cost curve above the shutdown price. That's our individual supply curve. What we're going to be looking at in the future is the market supply curve, which comes from adding up these individual supply curves. But let's look at this individual business and their individual supply curve. We already know from previous discussions the determinants, so if this is demand and this is supply, which is coming from here, we already know what would shift the supply curve. So think back, what are the determinants of supply? What shifts the supply curve? So let's make a list. What do we have? We have the cost of inputs, right? Changes in those factor payments change the amount that businesses are willing and able to sell at different prices. So maybe we should write out the definition of a supply. Supply is let's do this. Supply is the relationship between price and the amount that businesses are willing and able to sell. Right? That's our market supply. And if it's just one business, then we have our individual supply. So it's a relationship between price and the amount that a business is willing and able to sell. That's the supply curve here. So what changes the relationship between price and quantity supplied? A change in the cost of inputs, right? So changes in wages, for example, changes in whatever the raw materials are that are being used to make this good or provide this service. Other things that change supply. What was the list? Technology. What else? Business taxes. All right. What else? Expectations of future prices. What else do we have? Number of sellers. That'll change the market supply. Here we just have one seller. And the sixth one is the price of related goods. And that would be your complements in production. And I'm running out of room. Substitutes in production. So those are the things that change supply. And we already know that list from previous work that we've done, but let's focus on some of these here. So let's focus particularly on our 1, 2, and 3 here. Cost of inputs, technology, business taxes. Okay, so let's look at how they relate to the cost curves that we've been creating. So let's look at, so we know that's our supply curve. Let's look at what happens if we cut costs. So we want to focus on the costs here that change our productivity. So if we can cut costs so we get more bang for our buck, or if we can do new technology that makes us more efficient, the idea here is, can we make some changes that will allow us to produce more as we add each worker? So the idea here is that we look at these costs, cutting these costs, can we cut the marginal cost, the extra cost to make one more item? So if we can have our workers cost us less, then the extra cost to make one more item is going to be lower if we don't have to pay our workers as much. If we have technology that means we can get more per worker, then the extra cost to make one more unit will be less because the productivity will be up. So if we can cut some costs or take on some technology that will either increase our productivity or decrease the extra cost to make one more unit, then we can look at the impact it has on the cost curves and on supply. So let's look at the example of technology. Take on technology in order to lower the costs, increase the output. So we get marginal product to go up. And we know that marginal product looks like what? Marginal product as a graph goes up, then down. And when marginal product is going up, what do we know about marginal cost? So if we're getting more per worker, what happens to the extra cost to make more units? If the marginal product goes up, the marginal cost will go down. So let's show that on our graph. So here's our graph. Let's label our cost curves. Okay, so which one is average fixed cost? That's the continually declining one. Which one's the marginal cost curve? That's the check mark. Which one's average variable cost? It's a U. And we know average fixed cost plus average variable cost equals average total cost. All right, we took on technology or some cost savings, okay? Whether it's tax related, whether it's production related, something that means the extra cost to make one more unit is less. So if we can get the marginal cost to go down, what happens on our graph is that the marginal cost curve shifts down. Marginal cost. Okay. Now, if the extra cost to make a unit is less, what other parts of this graph will change? Well, we know about a relationship between marginal cost and which other curves here? The average ones, right? What do we know? We know when the marginal is below the average goes down. And when the marginal is above the average goes up. Well, if the extra cost to make one more unit is less, then the average variable cost, so that's the worker in our scenario, per unit, will also go down. We're able to spread the cost of the worker across more units because the marginal productivity is going up and the marginal cost is going down. So we actually see a shift in our average variable cost curve. So marginal cost went down, which means average variable cost is going to go down. And we can draw the new average variable cost because we know where the new minimum will be. If the marginal cost is below the average goes down. And if the marginal is above the average goes up. So we can create our new average variable cost curve that's below the previous. The minimum is at the new marginal cost. Well, if average variable cost goes down, which other curve on this graph changes? Remember, average total cost is average fixed plus variable. So that means that if average variable cost is going down, average total cost has to do what? It has to go down as well. And we know what that new average total cost looks like because it's fixed plus variable. And we know as well the relationship between marginal and averages. If the marginal is below the average goes down. And if the marginal is above the average goes up. Okay. Where on the old graph, before we started doing all this shifting, was the break-even price. Remember, the break-even price is the price at which we are not making any economic profit. Okay, so that's at our minimum average total cost curve. That was the break-even price before. What's happening to the break-even price now? Why might a business be willing to reduce its costs or increase its technology? Well, it does so that now when it operates at that old price, okay, it's profitable because its break-even price has fallen and here's the new break-even price. So we can see the break-even price has gone down. So you want to be the first to adopt new technology or cost-cutting measures, because if you're a price taker in the market and the price is set, say, here, then if you're the one who lowers their costs or becomes more efficient, your break-even is now down here and you're making profit when others aren't. Okay, where's the shutdown price? Well, the shutdown price is the price at which you can just pay your workers, because if you fall below that price, you can't pay your workers, they don't work for free, you might as well shut down. If you can at least pay your workers, then you can use any extra money to help pay down some of the fixed cost. Because remember, in the short term, you have to pay the fixed costs regardless. So where is our shutdown price? Well, it's at our minimum average variable cost. Here's our shutdown price before. Now, with our new technology or our cost cutting, the shutdown price has fallen. So now we can operate at lower prices without shutting down. So why does a business take on new technology and look for ways to reduce costs? It's so that it can make more profit at the current price. And that might be this profit here, or this price here, where we're making our profit compared to our new average total cost curve. Or that might be that if the price is at the old break even, now they're making profit. Or if they were below if the price was below break even, by cutting their costs or becoming more efficient with new technology, they might be now operating with a lower shutdown price or a lower break even. So now they're either breaking even or making profit. So what has happened to the supply curve? Well, the old supply curve was the marginal cost curve above average variable costs. Now with our cost cutting or our technology making us more efficient, here's our new supply curve, marginal cost above average variable cost. So remember we said that cutting costs, increasing technology, all of those shift the supply curve to the right. What you're seeing here is that shift in the supply curve to the right, because now at each price, we are now willing and able to make more, and we're also willing to produce at lower prices than before. So that supply curve shifts to the right. So if we can decrease the marginal cost, increase the marginal product, we'll shift that marginal cost down, which will shift the average variable cost down, which will shift the average total cost down, lowering break even and shutdown price, increasing economic capacity, making it more profitable to operate at lower prices and higher quantities. So we can see now where that shift in supply is coming from. What we're going to be doing as we look at different types of competitive markets and different levels of competition is we're going to be using these graphs we've created here to look at the individual companies' decisions. We're going to look at the market supply and demand and how that impacts whether a business comes in the market, leaves the market, and then we're going to start looking at what if you're not in a perfectly competitive market? What if you're a monopoly? What if you have a small handful of competitors? How do these decisions change? You're still going to have the same cost curves, but how does the decision change? How does it impact the market price? So that's where we're going for the remainder of the semester.